in this lesson, we'll take a look at some kind of hard surface type modeling that we can do in ZBrush. So here we've got our little guy. We want to make a base for him. So let's go ahead and start by just bringing in a cylinder. We'll just start with the cylinder 3D. Let's go into the initialize settings for this. And what I want to do is I want to make it a little bit wider. And so I'm going to go ahead and take down the Z size so it's a little bit kind of narrower here. Let's turn on our polyframe so that we can see the current resolution. And I want to leave, I think, the H divide something like that, so it's got plenty of divisions there. And then I'm going to take the V divide down so it's maybe right around 6 or 7. So something like that. It'll give us just a kind of a base cylinder there. Let's now convert this to a poly mesh, and let's rotate it. So I'm just going to go into, let's go into deformation, and let's rotate this. And I want to rotate it. Oops, I'm offsetting it there. Sorry. I want to rotate it in the X. So we'll rotate at 90 degrees to create sort of our base. Okay. If you want to, you can go ahead and at this time append it to your mesh if you want to do that. So we'll go to our subtool. Let's go to append. We'll append the new cylinder. And now we can kind of get it and put it into position. I'm just going to lower it down. Okay, and I'm going to increase the size of it a bit. So something like that, bring it up. Sort of right in there. If you want to move it back a little ways, you can do that too. Get it right down below. It's actually to the side. Okay, so once we've got this, we want to do a little bit of modeling on this. So I want to maybe bring out a lip on the bottom. So let's start to define some polygroups for this, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on solo so we're not seeing that other piece there. So Control Shift, and I want to make sure to go back to the select rectangle, and let's drag across the top, and that'll just select the top. Control W to polygroup that. Let's do the same thing on the bottom. Polygroup that together. You can turn the floor off if you want to. Okay, and so I want to extrude out this row of faces, and so what I can do is hide everything but that row. So I'll click twice on that top one, click on the bottom one, and then I can just drag across, hit Alt to turn that red, and now I'm left with this single ring of polygons that it's visible. So now we can go into geometry, and let's go into edge loop. And so what we want to do is we want to extrude this part out. And so we want to create an edge loop, and we want to displace it. So we'll add a little bit of value in here for the displacement, and we'll hit edge loop. You can see that that has created an edge loop that sticks out, but it's a little bit too soft for what we want. So I'm going to turn on crisp, and let's increase the amount. There you can see that that's actually extruded that out and created a band. Let's go ahead and set that all the way up to 1. And you can see we can extrude a little lip out. It's created a new polygroup. Now if you want to group this all together, you can hit Control W to group that, Control Shift and click, and you get back your new piece with now the geometry on it. Okay. Now let's say we want to do the same thing at the top. We want to create kind of an edge loop here. We can create an edge loop that way. We don't want to raise it up this time. We can go ahead and create an edge loop. And you can see how that creates a new loop across the top. Okay. Now we could come in with that top loop. And let's deselect everything else. And we could take this top loop, and let's say we want to offset this a little bit. And we can go ahead and raise that up. Now in this case, you can see I've also got this sort of center selected, so I'll hide that. And then we'll go ahead and extrude it up just by hitting edge loop. And let me unhide everything. So let me just hide this one, and there you can see it's raised up a little bit. If I go back in, you can see now I've got some geometry here that is raised up. We can subdivide this. Oops. Go ahead and select that. Make sure I unmask everything. We can go ahead and subdivide that and see that now we're getting some sharp edges where we want. So subdivide it a few more times. And then you can see that if you look at this, you've got some hard edges combined with very smooth corners here, which is good. So you can go in and actually extrude out faces like that. You're not going to get anything complex like you would get from a dedicated modeling program that you're going to be using like Maya or 3ds Max, as far as the having a lot of control over the points. But you do have the ability to extrude out different polygons and organize those into your polygroups so that they'll work. Okay. So now that we have our sort of base built out, let's actually look at using some of the other tools that we've got here. So here we've got just a sphere, and let's go ahead and subdivide this a few times. And we talked a little bit about using the clipping brushes. Those are going to be Control-Shift. You'll be able to use those. And the clipping brushes really are going to allow you to really make some interesting effects here. So if I come in here and use the white circle, you can see it's clipped away everything but what was inside there. If I go ahead and move that over and I hold down Alt and make it dark, I can clip that away, which is pretty cool. So I can create some really interesting effects. You can combine that with the symmetry, for instance, radial symmetry, and you could come in here and click through, clip that through, and you could make some really cool hard surface type looks here. Okay. You could also use different brushes here. So Control-Shift, we could use the clip curve. And again, you come in here. Alt will allow you to create a point here. So I'm going to hit Alt twice to create a sharp point. And you want to keep the shadow on that outside. You can see the shadow from that line. And so here we've kind of chopped it into pieces there. If you want to create something a bit smaller. So you got some really cool things going on there. You can also use the clip rectangle again. We kind of looked at that earlier. Flatten off the top of that if you want to do that. Okay. Also, when you've got detail in here, for instance, let's just kind of mess this up a little bit. Add a little bit of sculpt here. The polish brushes will enable you to create some hard surface type of effect. So if you come in here with the polish brush, it's going to allow you to come in and create this sort of sharp line that's also curved. So think of, kind of car parts and things like that. So we're able to come in here and polish this. We can smooth it back out, but the polish will enable you to get this sort of smooth surface with hard lines next to it. So I'm able to now kind of polish this up and create kind of a molded sort of a look. Okay. In there. So polish is also a good use for, or a good tool rather, for doing some hard surface modeling. We actually have a course dedicated to hard surface techniques. The polygroups are going to come in handy when you're working with hard surfaces as well. They're going to come in really handy. We can define panel loops and things like that, which we'll talk about in the next lesson. Okay, so if you need to extrude pieces of your geometry, you can use edge loop to do that and just add a little bit of displacement to it to add that out. You can also, when you have geometry that you want to be sharpened, not only can you add edge loops, but if you want to, you can also crease those edges. And just looking at the crease, you can crease it based on polygroups, or you can crease the border edges. If you have any open edges, you can crease those, things like that. So creasing will also help you keep those sharp edges that are so important when you're working with hard surfaces. So the next thing that we will look at is using panel loops, and we'll actually use those to create the teeth for our little worm character. So we'll go ahead and do that next.